Once upon a time, in the bustling city of Lagos, lived a young woman named Ewa. While growing up, she had a very tough life. Ewa's mother, Ajoke, blamed Ewa for all her misfortune. She called her a bringer of ill luck. Ajoke became pregnant with Ewa when she was a teenager. Unfortunately, because of her promiscuity, she was unable to identify the man responsible for her pregnancy. Her overly strict religious parents disowned her for bringing shame to the family, forcing her to fend for herself. She had to beg and do anything she could lay her hands on to survive. After the baby was born, things got worse for her. There was little she could do to earn money, and she soon realized that babies came with lots of responsibilities. Ajoke became bitter. Things were not turning out well for her. She regretted the life she had lived and wished she had listened to the advice of her parents. When things became unbearable, she started sleeping with men to get extra money. However, her daughter, Ewa, was often at the receiving end of her mother's frustration. Ajoke would lash out at the poor girl at the slightest provocation and beat her mercilessly. Sometimes she would deny her food. School was not even in the cards for her. Ajoke, for one day, did not even consider the need to send the girl to school. Ewa, at a very young age, knew that she was on her own, and if she would survive in this world, she had to work very hard. By the time she turned 13, she was almost living on her own. Ajoke went out for days, and when she was around, she would spend the whole day drinking alcohol and smoking. Sometimes she would bring home a man and force Ewa to sleep outside since they lived in a single-room apartment. The young girl, despite the harsh conditions she found herself in, remained humble and kind. She hated the way her mother lived. Therefore, she was determined to carve out a better future for herself. Iyanu sold food very close to where Ewa and her mother lived. She prepared different kinds of dishes, ranging from spicy jollof rice to beans, spaghetti, fried plantain, amala and ewedu, and some other equally delicious African food. She was a very kind and generous woman. Ewa would often go to her shop to assist her in cooking, serving her customers and washing plates. At the end of each day, Iya Anu would give her food and pay her a modest amount of money for the services she rendered. The woman and everyone in the area knew Ewa's predicament. Therefore, they were happy that she was trying hard to make a living for herself. Ewa continued to work for Iyanu for a long time and saved the money she was paid, with the hope of starting up her own food business when she saved enough money. One day, Ajoke went out as usual and never came back. Ewa waited for days, but her mother did not show up. Nobody had seen her. It was as if she disappeared. Ewa decided to go through her mother's things with the hopes of finding a clue or even a phone number to call. It was then she noticed that a reasonable portion of her mother's belongings were missing. It dawned on her. Her mother had finally abandoned her and disappeared. Ewa had never experienced maternal love, but still, she felt very sad that her mother was gone. Or maybe it was the feeling of not being wanted. But her mother's disappearance was a big blow to her. She cried for days and nights, alone, with no one to console her. She had no friends, for most of the girls in the area did not like to associate with her, so she stayed on her own always. Ewa was 17 at this time. She knew that things would be quite different now since her mother was gone. She had to pay house rent, light bills, security and other little bills that would pop up. The first thing she decided to do was to move out of that area. Everyone looked at her now with pity and would always ask her questions. She got tired of their pitiful and insensitive remarks. Her sadness and pain soon became anger. She vowed to herself that she would never forgive her mother and she never wanted to see her again. She had worked for Iyanu for 4 years now, and in that period, she was able to save a substantial amount of money. With this, she planned to start a new life in a different place. When she told Iyanu about her plans to move, Iyanu, who had become like a mother figure to her, offered her a place to stay. But Ewa insisted she wanted to be as far away from that community as possible. The kind woman understood the girl's predicament and out of love gave her some money to add to what she had and also prayed for her. Ewa was moved to tears. She did not know she could experience this kind of love. It was the first time someone would show her love, and she promised herself to never forget Iyanu. Many years have passed. Ewa has blossomed into a beautiful young woman. She lived in her own small apartment and sold food in the streets of Lagos. She would wake up very early in the morning, cook different delicious food just as she learned from Iyanu, and then arrange them on a tray. She usually hawked her food on the streets and different building construction sites. She cooked so well that before it was known, she had finished selling all her food. She was not rich, but she had enough to take care of herself and pay her bills. In another part of Lagos was a young man in his early 30s named Uzo. He had graduated from the university with a distinction, a first-class student of electrical electronics. Yet, 7 years later, he had not gotten a job. He had roamed the streets of Lagos in his endless search, but there was no visible results. Having nowhere to stay and no money, he perched with his childhood friend Collins in a small one-room and parlor apartment. Collins not only put a roof above his head, he fed Uzo and even gave him transport fare to attend all the numerous unsuccessful interviews he attended. When Collins saw that things were getting out of hand, He advised Uzo to find a menial job that would fetch him daily income while he waited to land his dream job. But Uzo would not hear of it. I am a first-class student, the best graduating student for that matter. I cannot descend so low and mingle with these illiterates doing all this dirty job. I know my worth, he would often boast. This attitude angered Collins a lot. He could not understand why a young man who owned nothing in his name would be so proud. But he tolerated Uzo. Uzo had been there for him during their university days. Collins was not a very intelligent student, but having Uzo by his side made things a bit easy for him. Uzo assisted him with assignments and even helped him receipts for courses he failed. Because of this, Collins felt indebted to Uzo, but he was getting tired. One day, he called Uzo again. "My guy, I know you have been trying, but I think you are getting too ahead of yourself. You have gotten several jobs in the past, but you turned them all down because you feel you deserve something better with your first-class results. Now, you have been getting interviews from bigger companies, but they want experience, which you do not have. If you had taken those smaller jobs, now you would have gathered enough experience to take on bigger jobs." These words angered Uzo. "Wait oh," he cut in. "Did you call me here to insult me just because you are giving me food and accommodation? After all I did for you?" Collins became confused. "I am not insulting you, Uzo. I am only trying to suggest a way out of this situation. You are not getting younger and the economy is hard. I have my parents and siblings to take care of, and I have also been taking care of you for the past 7 years. Haba, I have tried now. I have begged you to take on menial jobs with daily pay, even if it's to work in a building construction site and get paid daily, but you feel too big to do anything." Uzo became angry, and they threw hot, angry words at each other. In the heat of the moment, Collins asked Uzo to leave his house. It was then that the consequences of his action dawned on him. Uzo pleaded and pleaded with Collins, but Collins had made up his mind. Besides, he felt that if he did not take this drastic action, Uzo would not be able to face the harsh reality of life. Uzo, having nowhere to go, roamed the streets. He had no money and no family around. Collins was the only one he considered family in Lagos. Even if he decided to go back home to his people in the village, he had no money to transport himself. One would think that going through all these challenges would reset Uzo's thinking. But no, he still sat on his high horse with nothing in his pockets. For 2 days, he had had no food. He walked aimlessly, and at night, he looked for an uncompleted building to sleep in. He begged passers-by for alms, but everyone ignored him, saying he was young and had complete body parts. While he was walking down the street one day, almost at the verge of giving up, he saw a young lady carrying a tray of food. Out of hunger, he fell on his knees as she came closer to him, pleading for her to give him a little food. The young woman was shocked at first, but she soon realized that the young man was harmless and just hungry. Moved with pity, she set her tray down and gave him food to eat. Uzo, who had not eaten for days, hungrily wolfed down the food within seconds. After eating, he thanked the young lady and continued his aimless journey. The next day, he deliberately waited for the kind food seller at the same spot he met her the day before. Luckily for him, she passed through that same road again. Immediately Uzo saw her approach, he knelt before her again. "Please, my sister, I swear this is the last time I will beg you. Please have mercy on me. I need some food, no matter how little." The young lady wanted to protest, but she saw the tears in his eyes. Moved with pity again, she gave him food to eat, but she warned him that it would be the last time. She watched him eat hungrily, just like the day before, and wondered why such a handsome young man would be begging in this manner. She sat beside him. "Please, Oga, what is your name?" With his mouth full, he told her his name. She smiled at him. "My name is Ewa," she said. Still gulping down his food, he nodded to indicate that he heard what she said. "I'm sorry," she continued, "but I want to ask you a question. How come a man like you is going around begging for food?" It is a long story," Uzo replied. "Can you believe that I have graduated from the university for 7 years now and graduated as the best student in my department with distinction, first class. But up till now, I have not been able to get any job. Everyone who has interviewed me wants an experienced person. And my friend, who I have been managing with, can no longer accommodate me. He sent me out of his house. So here I am, roaming the streets of Lagos with nowhere to go." Ewa was moved with pity. She wanted to help him, but she was scared. She did not really know him or if he was telling the truth. But then, mere looking at him, he looked pathetic. So she decided to help him. She told him about one very big building construction site she usually carried her food to sell. They are building a very big mall, and the Chinese are in charge of the project. I heard they pay very well, and they pay daily. You could make a lot of money if you work hard, she said, smiling. Her smile faded when she saw the look on Uzo's face. "Ah, you don't like the job? They pay really well, she said. "Stop now, Ewa. How do you expect that a whole me will do that kind of lowly job with all my qualifications?" Ewa burst into laughter. "Wait, you cannot do a lowly job, but you can beg my lowly food, Abi? You are not serious," she hissed and made to carry her food tray. Uzo, at this point, realized that he was on his own, and no one would help him if he did not help himself. He apologized to her for his attitude and accepted to do the job. She took him to the construction site and introduced him to the foreman as her brother. The foreman, because of his likeness for Ewa and her industrious spirit, took Uzo and he was asked to start work immediately. All he was required to do was to carry the mixed cement up to the bricklayers, and at the end of each day, he would be paid 4,000 naira. At the end of the day's work, just as he was told, he was paid his money in cash. His heart was filled with joy. He had not held this kind of money in a very long time. He thanked Ewa for helping him secure this job and promised that he was going to do it with all diligence. The only problem now was that he had nowhere to sleep. Ewa, once again, in the goodness of her heart, offered to let him sleep in her house until he saved up enough money to get his own apartment. Uzo could not believe his luck. She was indeed his helper, sent from above. And this was how Ewa and Uzo met. Ewa lived in a single bedroom apartment which had its own bathroom and kitchen. Her bed was not very big, so she took the bed while Uzo slept with a mat on the ground. That day was the first time he would do any form of hard labor, so he was in pain all over. Ewa noticed he was in pain, so she helped him massage his body with a hot balm. Uzo kept wondering how a person could be this nice to a stranger. He thanked his stars for making their paths cross. From that day, Uzo and Ewa would wake up very early. He would assist her to prepare the food she would sell, and they would both go out together. She always made sure she packed his lunch, so he had food to eat. As time passed, Uzo started developing feelings for Ewa. However, his feelings were not genuine. Ewa felt something for him too, but she would not let herself get carried away. She had carefully guarded her heart all these years. She had never been with a man. She remained angry at her mother and vowed never to forgive her. But deep down, she knew that her mother was depressed and had had no one to help her. She promised herself never to let what happened to her mother happen to her. A man had gotten her mother pregnant as a teenager and abandoned her. She was not going to let that happen to her, and the only way to stay safe was to avoid men totally. Unknown to Ewa, Uzo was only pretending. He saw her as a means to an end. She gave him a roof over his head and fed him. All the money he earned, he saved for himself without contributing any dime to support Ewa in running the daily expenses. He liked comfort and was determined to do whatever it takes to win her affection. She had told him about her background and her mother, so he knew that she had not experienced love. All he needed to do was show her sweet love, and she would fall for him. And then he would be able to get more money from her. He planned to secretly start making plans to travel abroad, and when he had made enough money, he would pay her back all the money he took from her. In his little mind, his wicked plans made sense to him. But as always, the universe has its way of helping the helpless. Uzo started buying her gifts and giving her little surprises. He made sure to assist her to do whatever needed to be done. He listened to her daily stories and laughed at all her jokes. Sometimes, he even took his time to go to the market and surprise her with a special delicacy. Ewa loved how intentional he was about her. She started to fall in love with him. The moments she spent with him were the happiest moments of her life. Apart from Iyanu, who had passed a few years ago, no one has shown her this kind of love. Poor Ewa. One day, Uzo and the foreman had an altercation, a serious one, because he did something wrongly and got scolded by the foreman. Instead of him to take correction, his pride kicked in. He said all manner of things to the foreman. "Do you know who I am?" he barked. "I am a first-class student. I graduated top of my class. Because I descended so low with all of you to do this job, you think you can talk to me anyhow?" The foreman got angry and fired Uzo with immediate effect. Once again, he became jobless. Ewa was angry with him for blowing up the job since it was paying well. Now she wondered how he was going to get another job. They had a long conversation and Uzo promised to get another job as soon as possible. Ewa was already head over heels in love with him. She had never been with any man before, but she felt so comfortable with him that she gave her body and virginity. After he lost his job, she continued to support him and cater for his needs. Unfortunately for Uzo, he could not seem to get anyone to hire him. All the construction sites were full. He became frustrated once again. One day, on his way back from his job hunt, a black car drove past him, splashing dirty water from a small puddle on him. As the driver stopped to apologize, there was a moment of instant recognition. It was Chuks, an old classmate from his university days. The two men were excited to see each other. They hugged, and the typical Uzo quickly assessed the situation. Chuks was driving a clean black Highlander Jeep. His outfit was clean. "And I am way better than this guy, he thought to himself. Chuks, on the other hand, was so happy to see Uzo after a long time. He suggested that they found a place to catch up over some drinks. Chuks felt really sad seeing Uzo in such an unpleasant circumstance. For starters, the man did not look like he was doing well for himself. Uzo was one of the most brilliant person he had met in his lifetime, the brightest in the department in those days. He would never have pictured him looking like this if he had not seen him for himself. "Uzo, wetin happen? What happened to you?" Chuks asked. As if Uzo had been waiting for the question all along, he sat up to face Chuks. "My brother, it's a long story. I have suffered. Can you believe that since I finished my National Youth Service, I have not been able to get a job? I have roamed the streets of Lagos looking for a job. I have been to countless interviews, but they all want experience. I have no house safe. If not for Ewa, I may be dead by now," he finished. "Who is Ewa?" Chuks asked, surprise registering on his face. "It's one local girl like that God is using to help me. I met her selling food on the streets, and since then she has been really helpful to me. She even accommodated me." After Uzo finished narrating how Ewa had saved him, Chuks was surprised. He found it hard to believe that a person could be this nice, especially to a stranger. He insisted on seeing this girl, who he spoke so much about. Without hesitating, he took Chuks to Ewa's place to meet her. Chuks was surprised to see that Ewa was not only kind, but she was really beautiful and young, and cooked very well. "You will really sell well if you opened a restaurant. You cook really well," Chuks teased her. "Thank you very much," she replied, smiling shyly. "But that is not my problem now. Please, I would like to beg you for a favor. I want you to assist Uzo in any way that you can. That is the most important thing to me now. Anything you can do for him at all, we will really appreciate it." Chuks was deeply touched. He could see how much Ewa loved Uzo. "You are really lucky to have this girl, my guy. If I found someone half as good as she is, I would be happily married by now," he said, and they all laughed over it. He was totally oblivious of his friend's wicked intentions. A few days later, after they met, Chuks called Uzo. There was an opening in the company where he worked. He had put in a good word for him, and an interview was set up specifically for him the next day. When Uzo heard this, he was over the moon with joy. Ewa was excited. Wanting to make sure that he looked presentable enough, she took him out and from her savings bought him new clothes and a pair of shoes. Uzo, out of excitement, promised to buy her heaven and earth when he landed the new job. The couple could not sleep that night. They were anxiously waiting for the morning to come. Finally, their waiting came to an end. Uzo went for the interview and was given the job. He could not contain his joy. Fortune had smiled at him finally. He had landed his dream job. The job came with a car, a fully furnished apartment, and a very handsome salary, including wardrobe allowance. He could not wait to get home and share the good news with Ewa. Ewa was ecstatic when she heard the good news. She shed tears of joy. Finally, God has answered their prayers. Uzo was to resume work immediately, so he started packing his things in preparation to leave. Ewa was surprised that she was not included in his plans and expressed her displeasure. Uzo assured her that nothing would change between them. He managed to convince her that he only wanted to get a feel of the new place and the environment before bringing her to join him. But before then, he would visit her every weekend. Ewa was not pleased with this plan, but there was nothing she could do about it. And so Uzo resumed his job. Finally, his qualifications has made way for him. He was a new man on his way to become one of the big boys of Lagos. The head of his department in the office was a very beautiful young woman named Ife. From the first day Uzo resumed work, she had her eyes on him. She made subtle advances at him, but he seemed not to notice, so she approached him. "Are you in a relationship?" she boldly asked him one day after office hours. Uzo was surprised that such a beautiful, successful woman would come to him like this. He had noticed her advances earlier, but did not want to make much of it. Now, he was convinced that she liked him. This revelation tickled his ego. She was his dream type of woman, intelligent, educated, and sophisticated. Having her in his life would give him a different touch of class and help him get to the top faster in the company. He told her that he had no relationship at the moment, and the both of them hit things off from there. Uzo and Ife started having an affair. He was the happiest man alive. He completely forgot about Ewa. He never visited as promised. Neither did he pick up her call or return them. Ewa was devastated. The day Uzo packed his things was the last time she had seen him. She did not have his address or even know the name or location of the company he worked for. She cried alone. There was no one to console her. This was the second time she had been abandoned this way. She felt like she was cursed from birth and wished to end her life. Chooks noticed the hanky-panky going on between Uzo and Ife in the office. He called his friend one day. "Guy, what's going on?" he asked. "As in how?" Uzo replied, feigning confusion. Chooks looked him in the eyes. "I see what's going on between you and Ife. What about Ewa?" "Ha! Ewa ke. Look at me now, Chooks. I have gone beyond that level. She cannot suit me. She has no education. Her English is not even polished. And she hawks food for a living. Come on now. How can she fit into my circle?" Chooks shook his head in disappointment. "You have beaten the fingers that fed you, Uzo. After all that girl did for you, this is how you pay her back?" "Guy, stop now," Uzo replied. True, God used her to help me when I needed help. But that does not mean I must end up with her now," he said, frowning. "You are ungrateful, Uzo. She hawks for a living, yet she was able to feed you and put a roof over your head, even as a stranger. You are a fool for leaving that girl. You think Ife is better. I promise you, you will regret this." Uzo was not moved. There was no way he was going to settle for less when he could get more. Ife was his ladder to success. There is no going back. Chooks was really angry about the way Uzo had treated Ewa. The girl was so nice and did not deserve such treatment. From the first day he met her, he liked her. She was compassionate and kind, industrious, homely, and loved with her whole heart. Her kind was rare to find in his world. He had meant it when he told Uzo that he would be married if he found a woman half as good as Ewa. He really liked her, but he knew that she would be hurting badly. All she needed right now was a friend. At the close of work that day, Chooks drove straight to Ewa's place. When he stepped into her room, it did not look like the clean, decent room he knew. It was in a terrible state. Ewa looked worse. He was very sure she had not stepped out for days. His heart broke for her. Immediately she saw him, she burst into tears. He could not stand seeing her cry. He gathered her in his arms and let her cry to her heart's content. A few minutes later, she stepped back. "I'm sorry I cried all over you like that." "It's okay, Ewa. Do you feel better?" he asked, concern written all over his face. "No," she replied. "I have never loved anyone in this world the way I loved Uzo. I was foolish to think he loved me. Now I'm convinced that I am cursed. Everyone that has mattered to me somehow just gets up one day and abandon me without warning." Chuks' heart broke the more. He realized that something was wrong. He saw something he had never seen in her before. This young woman was broken. Someone had hurt her before. He sat down facing her and held her hands. "Ewa, who hurt you this bad?" he asked. A tear dropped from her eyes. "It's nothing. I don't want to burden you with my problems," she replied. "It's no bother. I am here as a friend. I really care about you. You're such a wonderful person. You're like the proverbial mockingbird. Harmless, pure, and ready to spread love. Talk to me, Ewa." Ewa was moved by his kind words. Even Uzo had never shown her this type of kindness. She suddenly felt comfortable being around him and opened up to him about her childhood and how she was abandoned by her mother. Chuks hated Uzo the more for hurting her this way. He was sure Uzo knew about this side of Ewa, yet he chose to abandon her this way. Something shifted in his heart. He looked at her with wonder. She had gone through this kind of pain and neglect, yet she was still able to push herself to this point all by herself and still have a heart large enough to help others. There and then, he made up his mind. "I'm going to marry this girl," he thought to himself. "I'm sorry you had to go through all this on your own and still deal with Uzo. He does not deserve you or your love. You are too good for him." Ewa looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for being here for me. You have no idea what this means to me." He smiled at her. "It's fine. I'm glad I was here. Now, I need you to do something for me. Wear anything you can find, dress your hair, and let me take you out to eat. I'm sure you have not eaten anything. Hunger could make one feel depressed too." For the first time, she actually laughed and obliged him. From that day, their friendship blossomed. His company was like a healing balm to her wounds. Gradually, the pain began to go away, and she returned to her food business. Chuks made it his duty to call her every day, and on weekends, they would spend quality time together. She had found a friend in him, one she had never had. The whole thing felt too good to be true. She had no idea that one could feel this happy. One Saturday, they were hanging out together as usual. She decided to broach a topic that had bugged her for days now. "Chuks," she began, I want to sincerely thank you for being there for me these past few weeks. You have shown me what true friendship is all about without asking for anything in return. But then, I want to know why you have been so nice to me. He smiled. You're a nice girl, Ewa, and you deserve the same love you give out. From the first day I heard about you, I liked you even without seeing you. Then I saw you. You are exactly the kind of woman I have always dreamed about. Kind, hardworking, and compassionate. And then your beauty is a plus. Deep down, I wished I had met you before Uzo. But then, I figured I would pass you by a million times on the road if I had not met you through him. See, Ewa, I don't know if the time is right to say this, but it's the truth. I want to marry you. I want you to be my wife. I want you to be by my side every day. I want you to be the mother of my children. I want to show you love and what it means to be loved. I want to take care of you. I want to do forever with you. Ewa looked at him in shock, tears filling her eyes. She could not believe that someone would love her enough to think about marrying her, especially someone like Jukes. He was successful, young, and handsome. But what if he got up and left her too? I know what you're thinking, he broke into her thoughts. You did not make me come to you. I came willingly. I will never leave you, Ewa. I know that your past has made you feel less of yourself. But I want you to know that you are enough. And any man in his right sense would desire you. Let me love you, Ewa. He brought out a small box from his pocket. I have carried this around for the past 1 week, waiting for the right moment to do this. And there is no better moment than now. He went down on his knee and opened the box. Marry me, Ewa. Her eyes glistened with tears. The ring was a beautiful square-cut diamond. It looked very expensive, more expensive than her entire wardrobe. She went down on her knees. Yes, Jukes, she said, I will marry you. Now the tears came down uncontrollably. He took her in his arms and held her until she was calm again. Jukes was the happiest man alive. Somehow, he thanked Uzo for making it possible to have Ewa in his life. Their wedding preparations started immediately. Ewa wanted a quiet wedding, considering she had no family or friends. And Jukes respected her decision. 2 weeks later, since she had no family, there was no traditional marriage. They had a simple church wedding with a few of his family members in attendance. That day was the best day of her life. She had become one with her soulmate. While all this was happening, Uzo was still having the time of his life with his new lover. He was ready to take things to the next level. He did not see what was coming for him. One day, he planned a romantic dinner with candles and flowers and invited Ife over for dinner. Dinner was going well. They were talking and laughing happily all through. He had a bottle of champagne sitting in an ice bucket on the table. They would soon be celebrating, he thought to himself. As soon as dinner was over, Uzo went down on one knee before her and brought out a small box from his pockets. We have been together for a while now, and with each passing day, I find myself falling deeper and deeper for you. Make me the happiest man on earth. Marry me, Ife. To his surprise, she burst into laughter. Are you serious right now? I should marry you. You're obviously taking this affair too seriously. You are way beneath my class, and even my junior in the office. What could I possibly do with a man like you? You cannot give me my dream wedding. Look, I'm sorry to burst your bubbles, but there is no us. This was just a fling. I'm engaged to marry someone else. He's outside the country right now. This thing we have going is just temporary. Uzo became frustrated and furious. He could not restrain himself. He beat her mercilessly. It was a wrong move. The news about what happened got to the office before him the next morning. He reached the office to meet his sack letter. The gravity of what he had done to himself dawned on him. His job was gone. This also means that both the car and the house was gone too. He put his hand on his head. I am finished, he shouted. He went down on his knees, pleading with the manager. But there was no going back. The company had policies. Uzo left the office with pain in his heart and tears in his eyes. He had gone back to square one. He even had no money. He spent all his money on Ife and her expensive lifestyle. Now, he had no money, no house, no job. He was back to roaming the streets of Lagos. And then he remembered Ewa. So he decided to go back and beg her for forgiveness. Hopefully, she would take him back. Unfortunately for him, he met the house empty, and the neighbors told him that she had moved out. Uzo became frustrated. He had no idea what to do. He could not even face Chuks. He must have heard what happened at the office. But then he was hungry. He had no choice. Chuks was his surest bet. He decided it was better to meet Chuks face to face, for he felt that he would not take his call if he called. He was about to receive the biggest shock of his life. When he got to Chuks' house, the door was answered by a beautiful young woman who was visibly pregnant. Looking closely at her, it was none other than Ewa. His eyes opened in shock. He was speechless. A voice resonated from inside. Who is there, babe? Come and see for yourself, Ewa replied. Chuks came to the door to meet his wife. Alas, it was the popular Uzo standing at his doorstep. I see you have met my wife already, Chuks said. Uzo was stupefied. I am sorry, Ewa. No, Ewa interjected. You don't have to be sorry. I have forgiven you and forgotten. God only used you as a tool to help me meet the real person He has designed for me. Don't feel bad. You should be worrying about yourself and your condition right now. Uzo was speechless once more. The hunger he was feeling suddenly disappeared. He realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life, and this one could not be undone. With shame and regret, he turned on his heels and walked away. He had learned his lesson the very hard way. His arrogance had led to his downfall. It was what had kept him at the bottom all those wasted years. But moving forward, he promised himself to be a better person and do better. Perhaps he would be able to get it right this time. Ewa and Chuks embraced their new future, determined to let their love guide them as they continued their journey to forever. Hi lovers, if you're new here, welcome to my channel, and if you have not done that already, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you enjoyed this heartwarming love story as much as I enjoyed creating it, please let me know by hitting the like button, and also share your thoughts as well as what you have learned in the comment section. I'll be waiting there, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.